You're listening to the Sex, Drugs, and Jesus podcast, where we discuss whatever the fuck we want to. And yes, we can put sex and drugs and Jesus all in the same bed and still be all right at the end of the day. My name is Devannon, and I'll be interviewing guests from every corner of this world as we dig into topics that are too risque for the morning show, as we strive to help you understand what's really going on in your life. There is nothing off the table, and we've got a lot to talk about, so let's dive right into this episode. Hello, everyone. Today I got with me Miss Lola Jean. This badass woman here is a sex educator. She's a writer. She's pro Domme, and she's the world record holder for volume squirting. That's right, I said squirting. This episode is highly sexual and also highly educational, and I think those two make a great couple. We're going to talk about squirting for both women and men. Yes, men can squirt too. And since we're talking about men, we also had to talk about pegging. Yes, we know some of you boys out there like to get poked in the booty, and we're here to let you know that that is totally okay. Lola has a totally amazing blog on her website, which is lolajean.com. I highly recommend it, and I highly recommend this episode. Hey, Lola, baby. Thank you so much for coming on the Sex, Drugs, and Jesus podcast today. How the fuck are you up there in New York?
Good. I'd say never thought I'd be on a podcast with Jesus in the name, but I'm excited.
Well, hey, Jesus invented sex. That's who I believe in. If, of course, on this show, we don't, believe in who you want or nothing at all. That's always cool. But, as far as I'm concerned, God invented sex. We're just working through the motions down here. So all of the kickery in the world really started with him.
There was definitely some bondage that went on. I'm talking to the crowd,
That's right. It's about the crucifix.
Yeah.
Hey, you know what? Get out of it what you will, honey. No one can tell you were wrong.
I have a wrestling move I call the Jesus, and it's because I put their arms in a lock and then their head kind of rests on my pelvis. It hurts though. It doesn't feel good.
You keep doing it over and over again. Okay, so I went through your website. I researched you. I want to give a shout out to our friend David over across the big pond in the UK from the Authentic Man podcast, because I heard you on his show first and I was like, I have got to get this brilliant mind on my show. And here you are. This is a dream come true. And so, sex educator, instructor and coach, pro Dom, I'm gonna need you to tell me what that is. Wrestler, writer, no frills sex education. Can you give us a breakdown of all of these different aspects of you?
Yeah. So it sort of breaks down to income streams in like the way I describe it. But, first and foremost, I am a sex educator, which can mean whatever I want it to mean on any given day. And it's, progressed and grown and evolved over time, and it continues to. But what I find that I enjoy the most and what I am most skilled at and what people enjoy is really creating these experiences. So whether that is a class, whether it is an event, whether it is a product, something for someone, for honestly not someone, for multiple people to experience. I do coaching on a limited basis, but I'm not looking to see people regularly. I'm looking to provide products and experiences for the masses and not necessarily, individuals. And a pro dom is a pro dominant. So often we refer to this as a dominatrix, which also is a bit gendered as well, but industry terms is pro dom. And within that, my main niche is wrestling fetish. So I wrestle typically cis men for money, and wrestling, it's clothed, it looks athletic. I tell them it can feel like whatever you want it to feel like, but for me, it's got to feel like a sport. And I use more Brazilian jiu-jitsu to put people in holds, have them feel trapped. And that naturally involves a lot of, classic domination, verbal approaches too.
Okay, so you're mixing in some of the things from BDSM into the wrestling.
Well, it is. I mean, the niche existed like before I got into it. It was an underserved market because it's like, okay, of the people that are into this, how many can provide it? And if how many can provide it, how many want to provide it in this context? And then of how many can provide in that context, how many have the skills of a dominatrix as opposed to the skills of a wrestler or a grappler. So, and also this is, it's something that, it's naturally going to be eroticized because it has to do with a power differential, especially when you're thinking of the subversion of, female or femme strength to male or mass strength. When you're thinking of size, and it's the feeling of feeling trapped and a struggle, which is just naturally something that's going to be erotic to us. And then the bodies are just very close as well, too. So it's not that far to, put that BDSM element into it. There's a lot of superhero fantasies. I'm Superman and you are, the villain and you have trapped me and I can't get out of your grasp type of a thing. Like, it's not that far of a stretch where I feel like other ones might be. Like it seems like pretty obvious to me of why this is eroticized.
Oh my God. This reminds me when I was in high school, I did Greco-Roman wrestling for about 6
Hmm.
months before I got tired of getting my ass kicked, and then I became a team manager. But I will tell you, getting my ass kicked was never so hot in my life the way those boys would, and we know wrestler guys are, like, just delicious, and they would just pin me down, and I don't wouldn't even know if I was really trying to win, Lola. I don't know.
Hmm. And that's the thing is like it can still be completely platonic. It's just the context that changes it. So I can wrestle people professionally and then I can also do it in my sex life. And like it's the context that makes something erotic or not. Like I've taught classes on this that was honestly more textual, like contextual based. And there would be men in the class be like, I'm not gonna be paired with another man. I don't want to do that. That's gross. It's like you understand what we're doing by mixing the genders. That's the weird thing, right? You're supposed to wrestle people of the same gender. We're doing a weirder thing. But all of a sudden, it's like this internalized homophobia that just rules them.
Oh, that toxic masculinity is so not cute.
Yeah. Yeah.
To go, and it needs to go now. So with this wrestling, is this the sort of fetish or work that involves ejaculation?
Well, it is different for each person. So it still falls under sex work, even though that I might not be having any kind of penetrative sex or no one may be orgasming. In my practice, if I feel comfortable with someone, they can release themselves if they wish, but I'm not touching anything and I'm not cleaning it up. Nothing can touch me. That's my rule. So sometimes I'll like do it in their pants or away, or I'll keep my body away. But that is if I allow it and I feel comfortable with them. But I'm always to be closed. But if they want to do that on their own time, that's fine. Or I've had one client where I was like holding him up by his like throat, like not really, but kind of holding up against the wall, more fantasy style. And he, just released in his pants while I was yelling at him. And it was really hot. And like that's the kind of thing I would allow, but it depends on the person. And like I give it to them like it's a gift. But, other providers are going to be completely different with what they allow and what they don't allow.
So when he came, was he touching himself, or did he just come because you were choking him and yelling at him?
I believe sometimes they don't touch themselves when it happens, but yeah, he was touching himself. And this was one of the most memorable ones too, because when he ejaculated, he just broke out into hysterical laughter and like fell to the floor. And I was like, oh my God, what just happened? He's like, oh, sometimes it happens like, when I orgasm, and I'm like, that was amazing. Like it was, you could just tell how organic it was, but I'd never seen that before. And I was like, this is incredible.
Well, that's not type of shit you see in porn ever.
Now
Never seen a man break out in hysterical laughter. I'm jealous, girl. I
put
might.
that on the to-do list.
Oh, oh. So I want to get so a little bit of your personal struggle. So in my research of you, I found an article. And they were saying like you kind of got into this because you got fired from a waitressing job in New York of all places. So what what can you walk me through why you got fired and how you ended up in a sex dungeon?
Yeah. So I worked in advertising for maybe 5 or so years and I began to be bored and miserable and I switched jobs and I moved to New York and I was still bored and miserable. So I quit. I was trying to find another job and I couldn't, or a job that would make me happy. And while I was doing that, I was waitressing and, getting gigs and odd jobs and things like that. And I think some of the odd jobs maybe were, sex adjacent or within that industry. But as I was exploring that on my personal side, but I got fired from my waitressing job because I have a problem with authority. Shocking. And that honestly, that was really it with the way their motivation style and their authority style. So when I got fired, I was like, well, I don't want to go back to advertising. So let me find a job I don't hate. And that's when I started kind of making different connections in the sex industry that I was, exploring for personal reasons. I'm like, hey, maybe I can do this thing for money. And I mean, not like this thing. I worked at a sex party where I was a dungeon monitor. So I was like just in charge of like safety of the area and cleanup. And after I did that, I was like, well, I'm never gonna do that again. But that clued me in that, like, oh, hey, maybe there's things I can do in this industry while I figure out what I want to do with the rest of my life. I didn't go into it intending like I'm gonna be a sex educator. I was just like, please give me something I don't hate while I figure out what it is that I want to do.
It is important in this life to do things that we want to do because the opposite of that is doing something that you don't want to do, which causes stress, which will really draw down your lifespan. And
And I think it's that we either need to love what we do or we need to do something that enables us to do what we love to do. Because not everything we love to do, we should do for money or we should do professionally or, even, this, we could love playing the guitar. We're not going to be like a famous singer or something like that, but we love to do it. So it's not the thing that has to be, your lifeblood. Like I get a lot of people that, are really curious about being a sex educator, but they don't have anything new to say or share. They just like consuming it. So they want to do it. And sometimes that's not enough of a reason.
honey, sex sells. You just can't go wrong with it. How did you find that particular sex opportunity after you got fired from waitressing?
I was attending sex parties, or I was trying to. I think I went to 2 and had a horrible time each time and left crying. And I was like, "Well, I didn't like attending it. Maybe I could work at it." And, like, in general, I like having a job at a party. I like having something to do. Even now, and a lot of my colleagues are like, "Yeah, I prefer to have a job at a party than, like, just be an attendee because you have a thing to do. You have a purpose." So I had contacted the people like, "Hey, are there any roles that you need filled here?" And that was how I just asked.
But, like, if
That's
somebody
all.
wants to get into this, do you find an ad somewhere? Is there a number you call? Can you just Google it? Like, how do you like, if I'm brand new, fresh, I hear this interview, like, "You know what? That Lola's on to something." Let me see how
Yeah.
where would one go?
I mean, a lot of it is because you have to think of like what are you providing versus what is self-serving. I am not a fan of academia and going that route for this field in particular, unless you're looking to do something maybe in like primary education or something within therapy specifically. But community is the key to anything involved in sex. Community is everything. You can't really go at this completely alone. You're going to have to be involved in community at some point, and also so people can vouch for you because there's a lot of really bad people around too, and a lot of gross people and creepy people, et cetera, et cetera. But I mean, I'm hiring a couple positions right now, so those are things you can always look out for. But it's attending events, getting to know people, talking. It's a lot of word of mouth. I can owe my career to word of mouth and me just not shutting up about stuff. And, not just like self promotion, but just talking to people and being curious and seeing opportunity. And it's a lot of my marketing, advertising, and business background that like contributes to this as well. But there isn't a specific path, and my path might not work for other people. And, there are other, like my colleague Cameron Glover has a sex ed business academy that's not an academia, type of certification, but it may give you the tools you need to create something. That's not the only route, it is a route. So there isn't anything specific. I will say I probably got in a good time as well, and also before everything went completely digital and cluttered, and I had already built a name for myself. But it's really, if this is something you're truly passionate about, expect to do the work and not have the work done for you. I feel like academia is just like, show up and we'll give you a degree if you keep doing the work that we lay out. Like this is not like that. But I will say for me personally, like the people I work with who, put in good effort and we work well together and I like what they bring to the table, like I champion them and I want them to do well and I give them opportunities. So if you're good, you'll get there.
I know that's right, girl. So I love how personal it is. I love how
Mhm.
personal it all is. And community is everything. You know,
Everything.
the community so much in so many different ways. You know, that's a good alternative, say, to maybe like more nefarious things like, oh, gangs, and gangs that inflict harm on people, and stuff like that. Cause when we and I'm thinking a lot about Pose right now, because that was all like done in like in New York, and then we have, our trannies and everything like that. And of course, Miss Electra worked in a sex dungeon, of course. But a lot of people in the LGBTQIA plus community get kicked out of different churches, homes, and things like that. Sometimes we end up like I did, homeless, or selling drugs, or whatever the case may be. You know, honey, I think I would have been in better company had I found my way into the sex community. Because it sounds very like motherly, kind of what you're talking about.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
even like pro dom and the pro dom community. I think when you were saying sex dungeon, you're referring to like a BDSM dungeon, and I wasn't putting two and two together. But like even the pro dom, like to be a dominatrix, the community is everything for making money, for safety, and for taking care of each other as well too. And like, me and my colleagues we're developing a baby dom boot camp for people looking to get into it or people that have just started. So and there's things you can do where it's like you can go to a house and you could have more training. There's downsides to it, but we want to present people to that and we want to make it accessible as well because it was something that was very, very gate kept too. But there is because it's like kind of chosen family as well. When these communities exist because they're the communities that existed before that did not serve these people. So it does tend to be like a chosen family taking care of each other kind of thing.
Absolutely, my dear. Now let's switch gears here. Let's talk about this squirting business. So you apparently, okay, world, y'all, this is so like amazing. Like squirting is so like involved, and I never knew this. I didn't know there was a world record holding her hold. I didn't know there was a recording for squirting. So according to my research of you, you're the world record holder for volume squirting solo. I see 1,250 milliliters and then 25 seconds. Can you explain to me this breakdown? And is this a Guinness record?
No,
Yeah.
because Guinness is a family organization. So they said, no, you cannot set your record with us.
Well, fuck you, Guinness. That means
Yeah.
I'm uptight. Squirt a little. Squirt a little. You feel better.
I know. And like, God, I did this podcast in the UK and like, apparently the person who like founded the Guinness World Records, his last name is like McSquirter. I'm not kidding. Or something similar to that, where it's like, are you serious? I didn't even realize it. But this was something that like I think I had kind of always like kind of joked around with like there was a scientist that I'd worked with who said the max amount someone could squirt was 900 milliliters. And I'd always joked like, yeah, but I feel like I could crush that. Like I know that I have an insane amount of volume and I have an incredible amount of control. And I'm very, very competitive. So when I talked about it, I think like someone was like, you should make just like set a record out of it. And if Guinness says no, make it a press event and like just do your own thing. And like I'm so glad I did because it gave me so much legitimacy because otherwise it was putting it's the proof in the pudding, right? I was putting my money where my mouth is and I don't do things small. So I made a big event around it. And I still did it to Guinness standards. So within a 1 minute period, and the stipulations were using only the assistance of one's person, meaning my hand. So it was no partners, no toys, doing it by myself, measuring the volume within that 1 minute period. And I didn't penetrate myself and I didn't orgasm. That wasn't part of the rules. I just did because that's how I do it, but also kind of to prove a point with a little fuck you that, we don't know as much about squirting as we think we do because I would constantly see people saying different things. I'm like, yeah, my body can disprove that, but that doesn't make sense for me. my story isn't being talked about. It's all about this partnered activity. You do this thing, this happens, very technique based. And I think that made a lot of people, myself included, feel really left out and feel like it is not any control over the person who is doing the squirting. We're just like passive recipients because that's what people with vulvas are, right? So, so yeah, and within 25 seconds, I squirted out 1,250 milliliters, which is, I believe, about 5.5 cups of 1.25 liters. So if you think of a big Coke bottle, more than that, it's a lot. It's a lot of liquid that poured out of my body as well. So yeah.
Okay, well, let me just give you a clap on that. So when you squirt, okay, you said you didn't orgasm. So it sounds like you can command your body in such a way that you can or cannot orgasm when you squirt. Is that
I can command my body in such a way that I could control when I squirt. I do not have control over my orgasm.
when you squirt,
I
does
mean,
it
I have a role in my orgasm, but I can't command an orgasm. I should say that.
got you? So squirting is your superpower.
Yeah.
So when you squirt, how does it feel? Because like in the porn and everything, the woman usually starts gyrating and all of that. And so is that like for real? Or like does it feel kind of like an orgasm? Or what?
No, so I like to liken it to touchdowns and field goals. So touchdowns are orgasm and field goals is squirting.
Okay.
And you can win the game with field goals. There's still points. They're a lot easier to get. You can kick them from further away, but sometimes you want to get a touchdown. And a lot of times when you get the touchdown, you get to kick the extra point too. So it's like, there it's if you're getting a touchdown, you're probably getting an extra point afterwards, unless you have a really shitty kicker. But or the wind's blowing the wrong way, whatever it may be. But they're just different, but it still is enjoyable. So I like to kind of separate, I think, of people who squirt. I think there's two different camps. I think there's some people where, it's if the wind is blowing the right way or if you stimulate them in a certain way, this will happen. Or there's people in a camp similar to me where squirting is how their body expresses pleasure. It's something that happens when pleasure happens. It doesn't mean it happens every time, but it's how their body expresses pleasure. It's just like how their body operates. So it's something that happens a lot more regularly. So I say it's very easy for me to squirt and I can control that, but I can't control to not squirt. Usually when I'm orgasming, I am squirting, but also like our bodies are still bodies. So sometimes I orgasm and I don't squirt. Sometimes I don't do either of them. And there are a lot of reasons for that to be able to happen. But I liken the feeling to it feels like a release. It feels like when you have to sneeze for like 10 minutes and you can't, and then you finally sneeze, or you have this itch that you can't get to, and then you find something on a wall and you scratch it and you finally get that itch. Like it feels like that kind of release, like, oh, okay, I got it.
Can everyone squirt?
I think everyone can squirt. I don't think they need to. I don't think they're missing out on that much if they can't, but everyone's on a different timeline. And some people, they don't start squirting or realizing they can until they're in their 60s or something like that. And it happens, but it has to do with a pelvic floor coordination, not strength, and just like relationship with your vulva plus arousal. You have to have that engorgement. But I think everyone's able to do it. And I've guided a lot of people to doing it themselves if that's something that they want to as well. But I take a really hands-off approach because like it's gonna happen on your own timeline. I taught myself to out of just like trial, error, and curiosity. But I also really hate squirting a lot. A lot of the time. I have a very love-hate relationship with it. So I'm not gonna tell people like, you need to try this thing because I hate it.
What do you hate about it?
I don't want to squirt all the time. I don't want to. And I hate that it is messy. And I hate, or even if it's messy, I hate that I have to think about cleanup and I hate that I have to worry about that. And it's always in the back of my head, in addition to like, well, I hope I orgasm or I hope let me focus on what my body's feeling. And it's helpful when I have a partner who like treats this as their own responsibility too. Like they come prepped or they're like, okay, let me get out the pads or whatever it may be. But I wish I didn't always do it. And it can be really annoying. And sometimes I don't want to squirt, but my body does.
Girl, you are so fucking amazing. Like who knew such struggles existed in this world?
I know.
So on your website, which is a totally kick-ass website, lolajean.com, of course, this will go in the show notes. You have a handy dandy squirting chart, and I think everyone in the world should look at this. It's kind of like an if then algorithm sort of thing, and it starts at
A flow chart.
it's a flow chart. It reminds me of my days in corporate America. So, like, who wants to engage in squirting is what it reads at the top. The right arrow says me, the left arrow says my partner. Then he kind of works his way down from there. And you say, does the person who wants to engage in squirting have a vulva? And you mentioned vulvas before. Can you explain to me what a vulva is and how this plays a role into squirting?
Yeah. So vulva is the external genitalia. Vagina is the internal genitalia. So when we're talking about the vulva, we're talking about the labia, we're talking about the clitoris, we're talking about the vagina. There's the internal clitoris, but we're generally talking about the sex organ. We're not talking about the whole genital. So the appropriate term is like we're talking about people with penises. You either have a penis, you have a vulva, or you're intersex. So that's just the appropriate term. And I'm not going to try to gender people because that doesn't really matter. Because, like, if you have a vulva, you are capable of squirting. It's not that, like, oh, if you're a woman, it's if you have a vulva. So I don't want to assume of like the people partnered. It could be two people with vulvas that factors into it. And even if the person with like the vulva, whether they're doing the squirting or they have, body empathy because they also have a vulva. So that's more of the question of that. And this is to understand of, to make sure you have the right mindset going into squirting. I like to say that this is the class where I disappoint men, or I just disappoint a lot of people because they're like, give me the answer. How do I squirt? And I'm like, there's not like here's the one thing that you do, but there has to be a general understanding. And I think a lot of people that contact me are feeling really pressured to squirt by either society or their partner. And if that is the case, like there's a high likelihood that you won't because of that until you unpack that, because you gotta do it for the right reasons.
Yeah, you can't be like all stressed out and shit.
Yeah.
Like your body don't
Yeah.
want that.
Or in some cases, it's like the people with the vulvas, they're like, I don't really care about squirting, but my partner does. It's like, well, they need to chill out.
And unpack why they're so big.
Yeah.
Porn put this in their head, or where the fuck did they get it from?
Yeah. Because the thing is, squirting is not about anyone else except for the person doing the squirting.
Well, now a lot of men read into that and they look at a guy fucking usually a girl in porn, and to them it's like, okay, he made her squirt, so it's like all the big male ego and shit like that going on. And so, which I'm not saying that is a good thing or a bad thing, but a lot of guys feel like if they can make a girl squirt or come, then yeah, for her pleasure, but he feels like the king of the world and everything like that. And so I'm feeling like they're probably wanting to maybe a challenge or something like that.
Well, then it becomes an experience about them and the person is almost just a body. Like I had someone once that got me to the point of squirting, but then I also bled. And it didn't feel good. So did they do a good job then? They're really focused on getting this like end goal. And I think it's okay sometimes to be goal oriented, but we can't be outcome oriented. And it's the same thing with orgasming. You can't make someone orgasm or squirt. You can have a really large role in that process, but if they don't want to or their body doesn't want to, like it's not going to happen. And I think we just need to rid ourselves of how much ego is rooted in sex and how we're so tied to squirting and orgasming, because I hate that kind of pressure. I hate that. Even as someone who squirts a lot, there's still pressure sometimes for me to squirt if my body's not feeling that way, or when there's pressure for me to orgasm for someone else's ego and experience.
Hmm.
I'm gonna fake it. Are you kidding me? Yeah, I will.
No pressure, people. It ain't worth it. Let's get to
Yeah.
the bottom of our egos and things like that and learn how to just have a chill life. And so I'm just gonna say three more things that are on the chart that will move on to something else. So just people can come and go and look this up. So as the chart moves on, you might have to see a what does squirting say about me worksheet. You might have to see a unpack squirting and goals worksheet. And for the mess that she was talking about that this can make earlier, there's a tip to invest in puppy pads or just do it in the shower on this flow chart. Like I said, all this will be website and everything will be in the show notes. This is just so awesome. And I may have to see if I can get myself to squirt after we get off of this. Yeah.
Can. It's different. It's not the same process, but people with penises can squirt too.
So is this different than like regular like sperm flowing out? This is different.
Yeah. According to Bobby Box, who is a journalist, he did a lot more research on this with other scientists, scientists don't know everything, so it still is not going to say it's 100% true. But according to his research, it's mostly urine. But like through my research, it seems to be like a similar kind of experience, and it's very pleasurable. It's a lot of fluid. It's post ejaculation, usually. And how they're able to do this is in a post ejaculate state. You would just kind of rub around like the pee hole, so around the urethra, like very lightly and kind of just like lightly holding the shaft since you're going to be sensitive. And it feels like a tickle. And then there is a lot of fluid.
No shit.
Uh-huh. I'll send you the article.
Yes, send it to me and I'll throw that bitch in the show notes too.
Okay.
Okay, so is there a way to like someone like make someone squirt? Like, what is the best way to do it if someone does want to try? Is it through penetrative sex, or would it be better a solo or a toy? I mean, everyone's body is different, but is there some sort of mechanism there?
I think that it is better to do it solo because then you're not worried about another person. And also, you don't have this communication loop where you have to communicate, they have to understand, and they have to do. And then that kind of goes back into this loop. If you're by yourself, then all you have to do is communicate with yourself, which is a lot easier than another person. And like, kind of, there's a lot of room for that to be broken. So I think it's easier to do by yourself. It is not necessary to penetrate yourself, and that's really going to depend on personal preference. If you want like a surefire way to being like, I want to know if I'm able to do it, using clit suckers or air pulsation ones that you put on your clitoris externally, these toys, I like to say like they give your body no chance. And it's not going to work for everyone, but for a vast majority of people, you're either going to have crazy pleasure, and a lot of the times people do end up squirting. And what I like about this is not like you're going to say, oh, this is this technique to do it, but it proves to you that your body can squirt and it can do it without penetration. And a lot of what I suggest in my class is when you figure out when you're able to do that, you're trying to, replicate the sensation. Now, when you do it with this toy, you kind of go to 0 to 60 real quick. So you're not going to able to replicate that sensation, but at least that can teach you or show you. But it's more a function of making sure that you are engorged and that the 12 o'clock region of the vagina is engorged, and that can be done through internal or external stimulation. And then it's really a function of doing something that you really like, whatever that is, wherever that is, while you do muscle kind of engagement with your pelvic floor. So that's both contracting as well as elongating. And it's more of a function of like figuring out how to get it out of your body. If you ever hear the splish splash sound inside of a vagina, that means like the squirt is there. You just have to figure out how to get it out. And that tends to be, I think, for people with vulvas holding things in all the time. You got to hold in your farts, your queefs, like everything because you're a proper person. And I think that becomes harder of that, like letting go, that release.
Let it go, let it go. So, okay, you have a very interesting way to describe BDSM. Bondage, discipline, sadomasochism is what that acronym stands for. Now, on your website, you say BDSM is a magical playground for its pliability to be tailored to each individual. Before you bust out the canes and nipple clams, finding your space within BDSM is not as simple as donning a collar and seeing how it makes you feel. While some may be lucky enough to have our kinky awakening solved with a strike of a crop, most BDSM has deep psychological components, including crop strikes. So Can you explain to us how you feel about, like, a little bit more in depth about BDSM, and why did you describe it as a magical playground? That's what really grabbed my attention.
I mean, because I think of this when I think of play fighting and wrestling too. It's that like we get to tap into things we're not allowed to in normal adult world. We kind of get to be kids again and play around. We get to, if we were LARPers, we get to engage in fantasy and we get to create worlds. We get to create things that don't exist. We get to be people we are not allowed to be. We get to engage in things that are subversive. That's kind of the nature of BDSM. So it is very much this like magical fantasy land where you can access things that you never thought possible. Why I spoke about it in this way is it kind of like really grinds my gears whenever I read different articles that's just like, we wanted to try piss play. So someone peed on me and I saw how it felt. Oh, do you want to try BDSM? Like spanking is a great place to start. No and no. Spanking isn't a great place to start because like, why are you going to start with pain? Why is pain? And the thing too is when you're doing something new, you already have novelty and novelty can be very exciting and you're going to confuse that with pain, which is something that, is very dividing. I started out with spanking and BDSM play and I thought I liked it, but I just liked novelty. I don't like pain at all. I just like attention. So it's very confusing and I think that's a really bad way to get into it. And with the piss play thing, it's like you're not no one's gonna like maybe for some people, but no one's gonna pee on you and be like, oh my God, I'm into this. It is so deeply psychological, and that has to be built for the piss play. So it's not like you're trying things and someone presses you with like an electro one, and you're like, oh my God, I love electro play. Like it's not this process of try this thing, see if you like it. There is really a deep understanding to what am I drawn to? What is my motivation? That's why I have like a silly little quiz on my website. So you can at least have a first inkling into like, oh, I'm more into shame play or I'm more into like service. So you don't start with pain.
I had a dream. I don't know. I think I might have been like in middle school. It was like may have been like the most one of the most erotic wet dreams, and not the most that I've ever had. And I only had this sort of dream one time. And it was about this. It was like this one guy was getting peed on by a bunch of other guys. I don't know where I got this from. You
That
know,
is called a piss bang.
okay, I didn't know that. So I had me a piss bang dream apparently. And I came so fucking hard in my sleep, it was just, like, kinda ridiculous. And this was when I was growing up, there was no I couldn't just go watch porn, I had to, like, get Scrabble Vision and see what I can glean from Red Shoe Diaries and Real Sex and shit like that. So there wasn't anybody pissing on anybody on HBO or Showtime, at least not in those days. So I don't know where in the holy fuck I got this dream from or why. I don't know, maybe this is who I'm gonna be one day.
Yeah. I mean, our imagination is always going to be better than porn, but a lot of these things, they sometimes if we watch them, we're like, oh, that can trigger something. But a lot of the time, these things are formed through different, subversions from our youth or our experiences. And we can realize it that way, but it's not going to be like, oh, I watched this on porn and now I'm into it. So it's the same that can trigger it and make you realize, oh, wait, why do I find this hot? But a lot of the times, like the table's been set well before that. That was just maybe the stimuli you needed.
Well, I'll let you know if I ever get peed on or contribute to it happening. So, can you explain to me the difference between a kink and a fetish? Because I would have thought that they were kind of the same thing, but on your website, you have quite intricate breakdown of the two of them.
Yeah, and I have a bone you can tell it's a theme. I have a bone to pick with a lot of, different things that are written, but I have a bone to pick with the way a lot of people describe fetish because I think that's not inclusive, and I think that it simplifies things and that it's very orgasm focused because kink, fetish, BDSM, the beautiful thing is it doesn't have to include orgasm, and that can be very inclusive for, people that are ace or aro or anything on the A spectrum as well or even people with like disabilities and for that nature, what they can find enjoyable. So a kink is anything that is subversive in nature or something that you derive pleasure that is outside of the norm. So that's really vague. So anything can be a kink. I'm really into, like dressing up in a little girl costume and walking down the street. That could be a kink for me. Or for someone else, that could just be their Friday and it's not kinky for them at all. So
Okay.
it really just depends on like the context of it. Whereas a fetish in particular is something that is a bit more either particular or obsessive in nature. How people like to describe it is something that you require in order to orgasm. That is very orgasm centric. It is not inclusive of all of fetish. So if you think of things that are also wouldn't otherwise be, but we make them sexual. Leather, latex, like those things aren't inherently sexual, but that becomes something that someone derives pleasure from, whether that pleasure is like, sexual in nature, like resulting in orgasm, but sometimes it could just be like getting that itch scratch, getting that satisfaction of like, oh my God, I got to feel the latex. And now that is a satisfaction. Or I get to do this scene where I'm kidnapped and now I feel that release. So for me, my fetishes are more just like subversive, but things that I'm like healthily obsessed about, where it's just like I have an intense fixation. I do not require them to orgasm. I do not require them to have a good time, but do I really like them? Fuck yes. And my fetishes are I have a mustache fetish, which does not mean every mustache I see I like, but there are ones I really like and there are really good ones. And I stare at them and I like to play with them if I am permitted to play with them. And I have a massive case of penis envy. So my other fetish is holding people's penises while they pee. And like I just get very giddy. If it is a person, usually it's a person I'm intimate with because it's a level of intimacy and vulnerability. I'm not going to want to hold everyone's penis while they pee, but I really enjoy probably like because it's very intimate and vulnerable in nature, but I like watching my partner pee. I want to hold their penis while they pee. I don't want to be peed on. I mean, I'll probably do it if it's someone I really love, but I don't derive pleasure from that. But like, I think it's because that is such a private thing that they do, and I get to be involved in it, and I also get to, tap into my penis envy and live it out a little bit.
I'm so happy you have a way to get your penis envy on. So that I just wouldn't want that eating away with you. You eating away at you.
Yeah.
So glad
Yeah.
you have a
Because
positive.
I'm not like I've only engaged in it a couple times because it is a very intimate thing, and I'm not just gonna ask a random person there. There has to be some I've only done it with like 3 or 4 people, but it's just like and my boyfriend knows about it, and I'll just be like, "What's it like having a penis? Just talk to me about it." Like
That is so hot. Let me see here. So you also have on there the 5 most common kinks. You say service, image validation, power play, shame, and novelty. And so I wanted to ask you, is shame the same thing as humiliation? Or are we talking about 2 different things there?
They're 2 different things. Humiliation is more a way of getting there, but I could humiliation could be involved in any of them. Humiliation could be involved in power play, it could be involved in novelty, service, image, all depending on it. So that's just kind of a vehicle. But shame is more around something like it's so hot how wrong this is. Like, oh, that is so like taboo or not allowed and it's being able to either subvert that of like oh it's hot how we're doing this wrong thing or it's just like I'm so gross and perverted and disgusting that I'm doing this wrong thing. So it could be either way, so it could be on like the positive or negative side of that, but that's the core of what you're doing and why it is attractive to you.
Because, like, so what would you say to someone? I had a lady one time I was talking to, and I think I mentioned humiliation or something like that, and she recalled and she was like, "No, no one should ever be humiliated. I just don't agree with that. I don't think that that's right to do that to people." I don't have a problem with it. I think she was reading either the wrong thing into it or too much into it. So what would you say to somebody who may think like she did? And she was like, "How dare you? You know, why humiliating a person just sounds inhumane. How do you?"
So this is actually how I got into BDSM. And I will preface to say the majority of people are going to fit into service oriented or image oriented. Like I would say a vast 80%. And then after that, like a bit less in shame and a bit less in power. But the person that got me into being dominant was really into verbal humiliation. I was like, oh, but I like you. I don't want to be mean to you. I don't want to do this or that. So I inquire to what it does for them and why it is that they like it. Because if you want to make your person happy, like that can help a bit more to understand, like, oh, this is what you're getting out of it. And also that's where I can angle it more because there's so many different types of humiliation. And in one spectrum, we could see humiliation as the ultimate form of worship. how willing are you to degrade yourself to prove yourself to me, of like how much you want to show that like that you worship me in that sense. If you're doing it for me, degrading yourself for me. But some people, like this person, really like to feel like really, really desperate. And they liked how they felt like kind of more creative. They felt more alive, more energetic when they were in this mode of desperation. So, if you aren't comfortable in giving the humiliation, I would say really humanize it and see where they're coming from. And that can help to being like, oh, you want to feel this way. You like feeling this way. But there's also some things that people aren't going to be comfortable with. I had one kind of therapeutic fantasy I wanted to live out where I had someone who I trusted and cared about, like while they were fucking me, I wanted them to like say my like worst insecurities and like confirm those. And I was like, do that until you're done. Doesn't matter if I come, and then just hold me afterwards and don't say anything until I engage in communication. And I asked like a friend and lover of mine, and he was like, I am not comfortable doing that at all. Like, that's very fair. This is pretty intense. So like we don't have to do these things for people we love, like, trust, any of that. Like, and because it could be traumatizing for them. It could not be fun for them, but you need to find a way for both people to buy into it. Humanizing it and describing it may do that, but also sometimes you just got to accept that like that's fine or not right now.
I heard that girl. Okay, so you mentioned the pelvic floor earlier. So
Yeah.
you really have, I would say, a bone to pick, it seems, with Kegels and the way they're being done wrong. Speak to me about Kegels and how are we supposed to be doing them right and why is this important for both genders?
Yeah. So I started talking to pelvic floor therapists as I was creating my squirting series because I wanted to first, I wanted to verify and validate things that were happening with my body and my pelvic floor with a therapist. But then I just started learning more from them, and they're fucking brilliant. And also, I was like, oh my God, our pelvic floor controls everything: urination, defecation, orgasm. Those are maybe the three most important things in our life. We're doing at least two of those every day, sometimes three. So and like honestly, this came mostly from the pelvic floor therapist, and I'm just championing them. But somehow they said like Kegels just had the best like publicist ever, and that became the thing. And whereas that can be something that is helpful or healing to certain vaginas, depending on what state, when we only focus on that, they're seeing that go completely to the other end of the spectrum. So having a hypertonic vagina where it is so contracted, it can't contract anymore. And that is another form of dysfunction that can also result in incontinence. So I think the thought behind initially with Kegel exercises are, oh, you just had a child and your body changed, your vagina changed. Do you not want to, pee when you laugh or when you sneeze? Then let's do Kegels so we can, work on the contraction. And, because of this stigma and obsession with vagina tightness and virginity and that whole complex, even though the vagina changes during sexual arousal, that's where I think people clung on to Kegel, tighter, smaller, contract. And there's weights for it, and there's different things you can put up it to do that. And the obsession became so much that's the only thing we're focused on. Whereas, a pelvic floor is going to need to be able to relax, and it's going to need to be able to elongate. It's kind of like when you think of a muscle. Like if I'm not just doing one bicep where I'm curling my muscle. I need to be able to extend and straighten my elbow and straighten my arm. Otherwise, like this isn't going to be good the whole time. So we need to use all forms of that muscle. And I think especially with squirting, sometimes we're not aware when our pelvic floor is elongating, when it's relaxing, when it's contracting, or sometimes we're only aware when it's contracting. So part of this is having a relationship with your vulva and a coordinated pelvic floor. So you start to develop more understanding of the different states of your pelvic floor. And most people aren't going to have a dysfunctional pelvic floor as well. I think people worry about that. Oh, is there something wrong with mine? Usually there's going to be other symptoms. But what I've found is having a better relationship and understanding of my pelvic floor has led to me having more control or more of a say over my pleasure. So I can do different things with my pelvic floor while I'm masturbating or while having sex. And I can actually have control or a say over my pleasure and my orgasm. I'm not just sitting there like a starfish, like waiting for like, oh, I wonder if this is going to feel good or not. Like I can control that with my body too.
Right. And I've heard it said that, and I've tried this myself, that men can use Kegels to
Mhm.
restrain erections by like,
It's engaging with your prostate. That's why.
right. So I think I read it in like a GQ magazine or Men's Health, probably something like that, like pulsing like 10 or 20 times. Now, you don't want to overdo it, but that Kegel pulse for men can help to get you a harder dick that works even better.
I think it's less because that still feels like do this thing to get this outcome like an exercise. And I think it's more of just like understand how it works with you. So, like, first do it so you understand, oh, this is what contracting feels like. This is what elongating feels like. But I encourage people while you're masturbating, like, contract your pelvic floor or do a Kegel where it kind of makes your dick do push-ups. Do that and see how that changes your pleasure. And then try relaxing and then try elongating. And it's like just see how it changes your pleasure. And then you'll understand maybe where you want to use it and assist it. But it's not a function of it needs to be so you need to be lifting at least 20 pounds if you want to experience the benefits. It's something where it's just a tool that you can use and you need to learn how to use it. But you need to learn how to pick up the weight. You can't just like whoop, put it right up. You still have to figure out how this works.
Smart, very fair. Okay. So you you also have a list on your website of the best anal sex toys for all genders. And what I wanted to say about this is how I wanted to get your opinion on pegging, and just I wanted, because I don't know if the world really realizes yet just how much men who don't identify as LGBTQIA really like to take it up the ass. And you have a very interesting photo in this section of the website, and it's like a Barbie doll laying on a bed wearing a bedazzled strap on with a hard strap on dick. And then this Ken doll who's about to set on this dick, and his hair already looks rough, like she's already been fucking the shit out of him. And he's about to straddle her in reverse, and he's looking quite droolingly at this woman wearing this hard dick. And so, can you talk to me about just how much men really like to take it up the ass who ain't necessarily gay?
Yeah. Well, I want to address you know, for what? For the stigma to do with a lot of internalized homophobia as well. But I think if you enjoy taking it the butt, that doesn't mean you're part of the LGBTQIA community. That doesn't mean you identify a certain way because it is who you are attracted to. I think a lot of people I hear saying like, "Oh, I'm hetero flexible because I'm okay if there's another dude in the room fucking." It's like, no, that you can still be completely heterosexual and then but you're not threatened by another penis. Like that doesn't make you kind of gay. It's about who are you attracted to or what do you want to engage in even? Because you can have a dick in your mouth and not be gay because you want to engage in something, but that doesn't mean you're attracted to the person. Maybe it's the situation. And so when it comes to anal pleasure, there is nothing particularly gay about that unless maybe it is, a man who is giving you the anal pleasure, but it's enjoying a part of your body. Your butt is a part of your body that you're enjoying. And it doesn't matter if it is, a dildo you suck on the wall, if it is your wife, or if it is like a non-binary person or whatever it may be. So how you choose to identify is how you choose to identify. I would say that, if you have such a problem with like, what if this person thinks I'm gay or does this make me gay? That means you have internalized homophobia. That doesn't mean you're homophobic. That just means there's a lot of, societal undoing that you're going to have to engage in and figure out why is that so much of an issue? Like, if I was, why am I worried about that? Is it because I'm worried about coming out to people? Is it because I'm worried of what people will think and engaging in that? So, there's a lot of harm in that. Of one, it's just like, yo, this doesn't have anything to do with sexuality, but also, what is your issue with sexuality? And I think that's why this, like, peg the patriarchy term, it's not like a fuck you to the patriarchy thing, but I do think a lot of people are able to maybe start unraveling this internalized homophobia and this relationship with the patriarchy when they're able to either experience anal pleasure or just have something up their butt and being like, oh, the world didn't change. Oh, I didn't suddenly decide I want to fuck men. Oh, I still love my wife. Like, yeah, it's just a butthole.
Just to break it all down, to sum it up, is just an asshole, y'all. Get over it. Get into it. And so, I mean, I'll give you another hand clap on that breakdown because I felt like that was a sermon right there. You've been needing to get that out. I'm glad you're able to get that out.
Thank you. Thank you. It felt good.
We just have two more things I wanted to talk
Mhm.
about, then I will give you the last word, my dear. So there's an article titled "Why Gender Expansive and Inclusive Language is Important in Heteronormative Spaces." I'm going to read a blurb from there. I love how open-minded you are and super thorough, in your writing and breakdown. Bitch, yes.
Thank you.
And to quoting Miss Lola, if you're heterosexual, which means attracted to individuals of the opposing gender, or cisgender, which means identify as the gender you are assigned at birth, you might not notice if a space is catered to non-hetero or non-cis people because most spaces will cater to you. Tell me why this is important.
Well, if you couldn't guess it, this started because I had a bone to pick. I was just seeing like a lot of spaces kind of, you know, continuously catering in this language and their excuse being like, well, we don't have any trans people here, or we don't have any queer people here, which firstly is like, you don't know, because also it sounds like you haven't made your space safe enough for people to either question that. And then it also becomes gatekeepy for someone just like, well, I don't feel straight enough or I don't feel queer enough. And it's not a function of, I end up getting a lot of pushback of this being pushback from like cis or, hetero people that are like, oh, why do we have to say, they, them, or people with vulvas? And, it's like, what does it do to you? Oh, it's just like a mild inconvenience in your day versus invalidating both their entire persona and being, and also preventing people from the opportunity to question their own sexuality or gender or what they're accepting of, and beginning to normalize that. And I think that was the biggest thing, is like I needed people to see of like, why are we fighting this? What does it do to you? How does it change your day? And it was something I just wanted to create as a template for a lot of spaces that, even this was one that I wrote it for, that I feel like is very still heteronormative. And I only see femmes and femme bodies being sexualized. And I was like, hey, it'd be really cool if the masked bodies were also sexualized. And like, oh, but none of the people with masked bodies send us pictures to sexualize. It's like, yeah, why do you think that is? Like, if something isn't happening, it has to do with the organization. And that's a lot of my philosophy, is like, if people aren't behaving the way that I want to, or they're not engaging in something the way I want them to, that means I've done something wrong. If someone I work for isn't giving me what I need, I briefed them wrong. Like, we need to be able to set people up for success. And that responsibility largely falls on these spaces, on these brands that have to set a foundation that people, survive within and interact within. And I think a lot of it may even fall down to a customer service model of like, but when we did this and when we used gender inclusive language, people, they didn't like it. So we need to go back. It's like, well, why are we doing things so people like them? Why aren't we just creating the things that we want to see and having people adjust to it? If I created all of my work so that people liked it, I maybe wouldn't be making accurate work. I wouldn't be making work that was inclusive. Maybe I would be work that was like, it was excluding people and their experiences. So it's just really not serving. But I think the moral of the story is like, if using gender exclusive language or not using inclusive language, it's a mild inconvenience to you at the end of the day. It is a minimal effort you can make, and versus to a queer person or to a non-cis person, like it's invalidating. And I think we can even like parallel it also to white people or to white cis men as well too, and to white cis women. where, the majority of spaces, like things are made for you. So when you're like, oh, I'm a little inconvenienced, cool. Everyone else is always inconvenienced. This is a one time you were inconvenienced, but you were not used to it. So you were like, wah, wah, wah. And that's like a lot of what I'm seeing pushback, especially from other white people, is just like, this isn't fair. It's like, oh, it's not fair for you. It's not fair for you today. Wow.
You know what? How does they say, can't take your own medicine kind of thing? You
Yeah.
know, yeah, well, hey, at least you're open-minded. And so, and I'm sure you've inspired a lot of cis people in your day and time to become more open-minded too, because sometimes people just need a good challenge.
Yeah. And it's the thing that I know that I guess myself as a white, I guess cis person, I don't know. I feel like I'm more in like the agender spectrum because I don't really identify with a particular gender, but I don't really care either. Like I don't feel non-binary, but I'm like, I don't feel like a woman, but I don't feel like a man, but I don't feel like non-binary. I'm happy with my vulva. I don't want a penis, but I really like them. And I like to pretend I have them. But it's not that I don't feel, included, or I don't feel like I identify with my vulva. But I think specifically because of that I'm at least cis presenting and I'm white, that it's also on me, and like I have a lot more patience, and not everyone can afford that. And I think there's always a lot of pushback of when I may be educating people or even working through stuff myself as well, because I will always be. But it's the patience that's what's really needed for people to come around. It's like, I'm still here. I will still help you work through this unless you do something that really pisses me off or that pushes back. But the patience is a really big key to that, unfortunately. And I got a lot of it.
I mean, if you really want a dick in this day and time, you can really go buy one. Like you could totally make change happen if you
Oh, I got a whole drawer of them, baby.
right. Like no surgery needed. I'll just go strap this on real quick. No, guys, you actually look like kind of like a mixed to me. Like I wouldn't have, I thought maybe a little Jewish, a little Italian, especially being in New York.
I am like 100% Jewish, but I also have surprise, a bone to pick. Jewish people are white. I don't want to hear any of that. Jewish people are not white. Like no, because especially when you think of like white privilege and disenfranchisement, like what people of Jewish descent, like I'm not saying you don't face anti-Semitism, but like how has that changed your privilege, your wealth, your opportunities, all of that in the long term?
You know my,
Not the same.
you know my,
Not the same.
yeah.
Yeah.
I feel you on that.
It feels like a cop out. I don't like it.
That's pretty badass. Never heard anyone break it down quite like that before.
I was going on a rant about this yesterday, and it's like it's something I started seeing a lot more with more people of color and black folks like talking about privilege. And it just seems like Jews were just like, but not us, right? Because we were slaves once. It's like, no, 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 no. Not the same. Not the same. Different thing.
Well, you heard it from one of your Jewish comrades. Yeah, just keep my mouth shut on that one.
Yeah.
But you have beautiful skin tone though. It looks kind of olivey and everything, very beautiful eyes. And so
Yes.
I'm not here
Thank
on her,
you.
y'all. I love me nothing more than some good dick, but I appreciate the beauty of women. So might borrow a pair of your shoes one day. I love me some heels. So the last thing I wanted to talk about has to do with sex positivity. I'm gonna read this, say a little something, and let you break it down and preach as you do. So, being sex positive, and I'm quoting Lola's website again, being sex positive is more than just yay sex. It is a positive attitudes about sex and feeling comfortable with one's own sexual identity and or with the sexual behaviors of others. So now what stood out to me here are two things. With the sex positivity being more than just yay sex, because I know people who they're like, yeah, I'm sex positive, which translates to I'm a hoe. So it doesn't matter how many people I sleep with, I'm not going to be shamed for being a slut because I am sex positive and no one's gonna make me feel bad about all the sex that I'm having. And then the other one is and the other portion of this is the feeling comfortable with one's own sexual identity. I've talked to people, girl, and they're all sex positives, sleeping around doing all they want to do. I'm not sure, God, I can't judge you. But at the same time, they are not fully comfortable with who they are, maybe not fully comfortable with their body. And so I was so happy that you had this written here. Can you talk to me further about this juxtaposition here in between yay sex and I don't even really fully accept myself, but I'm having all this sex?
Yeah. And I mean, I will preface to say that like it's always going to be a journey to accepting yourself. And just like sex positivity can always be a journey. There can always still be things that we are undoing. And it's not like, a stick we can put in the sand. But being able to have all the sex you have and not be slut shamed and be a hoe, that's a part of sex positivity. It's just not the only part. That is one bit under the umbrella. And I think so. I'm a brand ambassador for Field, which is a sex positive dating app. And I've been using that thing for 5, 6 years. I met my current partner on there. I met a lot of friends, lovers, all the things on there before I became a brand ambassador. But I would see this a lot on there of like, oh yeah, I'm sex positive and open-minded, but it would still fit under a like heteronormative patriarchal type of role where it's like, oh yeah, I'm sex positive and open-minded if it's just me with a bunch of women and there's no other penises involved. But the thing you want to do is weird. It's like, well, then you're only sex positive about your own things. That's not necessarily of sex positivity is being okay with the way that anyone, including yourself and other people, chooses to express themselves or engage. Like nothing is gross or wrong. That is your opinion you are projecting. You think it's gross or wrong because of shit you got to unpack or whatever that may be. And you don't have to engage with everyone. You don't have to project your views on everyone. If someone likes something and you don't want to do it, and maybe they like you, then don't do the thing with them. Or if you don't like them, don't do anything with them. So it's, everything is fine and can exist. And we don't have to project that anything is wrong or gross as long as it is, you know, risk aware, safe, consensual, sane, rack, prick, SSC, all of these different acronyms that we use in BDSM as well too, because there are things that might be morally or ethically wrong. So it's not to say that every way people express themselves sexually, but I think sex positivity has to do more with how we treat others versus how we treat ourselves, because how we treat others is also a projection of how we treat ourselves. If I think that you being into putting feet up your butt is gross, and I start telling people that you're a weirdo and a pervert because of that, that probably means I have some stuff I need to unpack with, my opinions of other people. So the best way to practice sex positivity onto ourselves is to practice it onto others and to, be objective and be okay of, oh, you're into this thing. Tell me about it. Oh, it's not for me, but cool that you have your thing. I really don't understand it at all, but I also don't need to. And that's okay. It's really at the end of the day, it's just, and that's okay. And not shaming other people because, there are a bunch of places that we get our shame from. It could be society, it could be other people, it could be ourselves. And if we can just eliminate at least one more of those, like that can be helpful to others. Because that's a lot of the times we're just afraid of what people will think at the end of the day. And yeah, I think it really has to do a lot more with sex positivity is our behavior with others rather than our relationship with ourselves. Because that can take time and time to heal, but if we heal it with others, it's often a projection that'll end up healing something within ourselves too. Because the reason that you're having a hard time accepting that, like I'm bisexual or I'm trans or non-binary, any of these things might have to do with of like what will other people think if I think this, what is that going to change in my relationships? And like that can be very difficult and that can take time. And especially if there's a lot of social undoing as well or something that you're fighting. So it's a journey. It's a journey to being sex positive. And the more you practice it, the better you get at it. The more you practice, you're into this thing, I'm not, but that's cool. Then you begin to humanize everything. One of my best friends specializes in like toilet training and poop sessions and things like that. And I love to hear it now. And I didn't get it at first, but now I'm just like, tell me the story. I'm never going to do any of this stuff. Like, even like, honestly, I was hearing about a food play session. She did something with pumpkin pie and like bananas. And I was like, that actually sounds a lot grosser than poop. And that sounds disgusting, but I still want to hear about it.
You know, what the hell can't you do? There's a market for everything.
There is. If you can think of it, it's a king. Probably.
Ooh, yeah. Oh my God. Okay, I'm gonna say this here, then I'm gonna let you have the last word. Meaning you can say whatever you want to the world. But when you said if you can think of it as a king, I was reading it and I think like Playboy or like Penthouse magazine years ago, and they like had this list of like this kinky fetishy shit some people had been done. One guy liked to step on bugs and he would come really hard from the squish of the insects under shoes. And then there's the other poor guy, he died unfortunately, but he liked to go out into the woods and get tree branches and stick them up his ass. And so, unfortunately, one time, like a poisonous spider had laid eggs in the tree branches. And after he had got done pleasuring himself with the tree branch, the spider eggs were left in his anal canal. His heat incubated the eggs fast, and when the spiders were born, they bit him in the ass, and then he died. So, anyway, I was just reminded of that. And with that, anything you'd like to say, my dear?
Well, and that's the thing with safe, sane, and consensual is that, safe and sane might have been things that were left out of this. Honestly, like sticking the, right stick up your butt with proper protection and cleanliness. Nothing, it's not going to be sterile. You can't really make a stick sterile, but like that could be fine. But there's a couple things left out in that too. And that's not to say that, he's a sick freak for doing that. He just wasn't smart.
Maybe maybe he wasn't in the community, he didn't have training. May-
Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing is if we start either normalizing or at least destigmatizing, and then we create community, a lot of things can be avoided or unsafe situations. I've actually been hearing a lot about a lot of like celebrities lately. And it's like, yeah, where are they going to learn? Because they're celebrities. So they can't go to your average like BDSM class. And, there's probably going to be a certain amount of shame involved in that due to the power dynamic that they already have. So it's, they're practicing things really unsafely. And like, how would they know? You know, it becomes a little complicated. So I guess for my closing line of where you can find out more about me as well is my website is lolajean.com. My social media, both Twitter and Instagram, is lolajean.com with a DOT spelled out. I have a variety of options of ways you can consume my content. Some of it is free, some of it is paid, some of it is donation based, and sometimes it is live in a city near you. So there's plenty of ways that you can choose to engage in this, including I have a couple of free classes, some more free offerings that are on the way. But, take the quiz, see what kind of kink you are, and look inward and understand when you might be projecting and where there might be an opinion of yours that is more personal that you might have to unpack and get comfortable being uncomfortable. Uncomfortable is not the same thing as safety. Uncomfortable is where you're going to have growth. It's where you're going to learn. It's where you're going to be sex positive, and it's where you're probably going to ultimately be happier and powerful.
Amen, amen, and amen. This one goes out to all the freaks, would-be freaks, and open-minded people starting their sexual journeys in the world.
Love it.
Thank you so much for coming on the show today, my dear.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you all so much for taking time to listen to the Sex, Drugs, and Jesus podcast. It really means everything to me. Look, if you love the show, you can find more information and resources at sexdrugsandjesus.com or wherever you listen to your podcast. Feel free to reach out to me directly at Devanin at sexdrugsandjesus.com and on Twitter and Facebook as well. My name is Devanin, and it's been wonderful being your host today. And just remember that everything is going to be all right.